My brother's girlfriend showed up at my apartment on a Tuesday night 14 months after he died, holding a manila envelope against her chest like it might fall apart if she loosened her grip. She had driven 4 hours from Kingston to Ottawa in February, which in Ontario means white-knuckle highways and the kind of cold that gets into your bones before you even open the car door. I knew she had planned what she was going to say. I could tell because she was already crying before I opened the door all the way, and Cora never cried in front of people unless she had already used up all the private crying she had budgeted for the drive. My name is Patrick Mercer. I was 31 years old, a site coordinator for a mid-sized general contracting firm in Ottawa, and by that point in my life, I had become very good at showing up for other people's crises while keeping my own life in a kind of suspended state, functional enough to look normal, hollowed enough that I'd stopped noticing. 16 months earlier, my older brother Grant had died of a brain aneurysm at 34. He was coaching a recreational hockey league on a Sunday afternoon at the arena in Kingston when it happened. He was mid-sentence when he went down. The paramedic said he likely felt nothing. I've spent a long time deciding whether that is something to be grateful for. Grant had been with Cora since they were both 26. She was a high school English teacher with dark eyes and a habit of finishing people's sentences when she was excited, which meant that in any room that interested her, she was always slightly ahead of the conversation. She had a daughter, Maisie, from a relationship that had ended long before Grant. Maisie was 6 when Grant died. She called him by his first name, but she reached for his hand in parking lots. I had noticed Cora long before I had any right to. Not the way people notice someone across a room. More like the slow accumulating kind of noticing that happens over years. The way she would argue with Grant about hockey stats with the same intensity she brought to everything. The way she always remembered what people had told her they were worried about and asked about it 3 weeks later. The way she looked when she was listening, really listening, with her whole face. I had filed it away the moment I recognized it for what it was, and I had kept it filed. Because Grant wasn't just my brother. Grant was the person who had sat beside me in the hospital when I broke my arm at 11 and made me laugh so hard the pain stopped mattering. He was the person who drove 6 hours to Sudbury when I was 23, and my first real relationship ended badly and I couldn't articulate why I couldn't get off the couch. He was the person who, when I got the job in Ottawa and moved away, called me every Sunday without fail, not to check in, just to talk. Because that's the kind of person he was. So when he met Cora, I was the best man at the wedding they never had time to have. I was Uncle Patrick to Maisie, which I took seriously. I showed up for birthday parties and school concerts and Saturday afternoons when Grant needed someone to watch Maisie while he ran errands. I fixed the broken railing on their back porch. I helped Grant put in a fence one August weekend while Cora sat on the steps with 2 cold Molsons and told us it was crooked, which it was. After Grant died, I stayed close at first. Then I started pulling back. Not because I stopped caring. Because the caring had an undertow I didn't trust. Grief makes everything complicated. Every small kindness starts to feel like it means something it shouldn't. Every time I made Maisie laugh or helped Cora with something practical, I felt a low current of guilt that I couldn't explain to anyone without sounding like a terrible person. So I made myself useful from a careful distance. I answered when Cora called. I set Maisie books for her birthday. I came for Christmas. Then Cora stopped calling as much. Then the months started stacking up. And then it was February and she was at my door with a manila envelope and her coat was still covered in road salt, and she said my name in a voice that told me she had rehearsed this moment many times and was already improvising. Cora. I stepped back. Come in. You drove all the way from Kingston in this? The 401 was fine. She looked around my apartment. You moved the bookshelf. 2 months ago. It looks better there. This is what we did, Cora and I. We talked around things with domestics until we found our footing. I took her coat. I put the kettle on. She sat at my kitchen table with the envelope in front of her and her hands folded on top of it like she was keeping it from floating away. Is Maisie okay? I asked. She's with my mom. She thinks I'm returning a library book. A pause. Long drive for a library book. Strong civic responsibility. She almost smiled. It was a real one, even if it was small and exhausted. You sound like him, she said. I didn't answer that. I brought 2 mugs to the table and sat across from her. Cora, what's in the envelope? She looked down at it. Her thumb moved across the edge of the flap without opening it. Grant left things, she said. When he was sick. I looked up. Sick? She swallowed. He had migraines for almost a year before. Serious ones. He saw a neurologist in September 14 months before. The neurologist wasn't certain, but there were concerns. Anomalies on the scan. She exhaled. He didn't want to scare everyone until he knew more. I felt the floor tilt slightly under my feet. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell anyone except me. Her voice came out careful. He said if he told you, you'd research every neurovascular specialist in Eastern Canada and then present him with a spreadsheet. I would have started with panic, I said, but my voice came out rough and strange. She gave a small nod. He wrote things down during those months. Letters. Sealed them. Gave them to me with instructions. She finally looked at me. He asked me to wait 14 months. He said if things were still the way they were between our families, and if I still trusted my own feelings, I should bring you yours. The kettle started and I stood up to stop it. More to have something to do with my hands than because I needed the tea. I poured 2 cups and carried them back and set them down, and I looked at the envelope. He wrote me a letter. Yes. Can I ask what he said in yours? Cora's jaw moved once. He said grief is not the same thing as love. He said I wasn't supposed to make a monument out of him and then live inside it. She pulled her hands away from the envelope slowly. He said Maisie needed a home, not a shrine. I looked away because those words went directly to a place I had spent 14 months protecting. He asked me not to be afraid, she said, if something I hadn't expected showed up in a familiar place. Neither of us spoke. Outside my window, a streetcar went by on Rideau Street, and the sound of it was very far away. I picked up the envelope. Grant's handwriting on the front. Patrick, you idiot. Read this. I made a sound that was either a laugh or the beginning of something worse. Cora pressed her lips together. He labeled yours differently than the others, she said quietly. I already knew that was exactly what he would do. I opened it. 3 pages. Cramped, forward-leaning handwriting that I had been reading since I was old enough to receive birthday cards. All right, if you're reading this, I'm dead, which we've established is inconvenient timing on my part. Don't eulogize me in your head before you finish reading. Just listen. I had to stop for a second. Cora was watching her tea. I need to tell you some things, and I need you to hear them without doing that thing you do where you pre-argue with yourself. First, you have been one of the best people in my life since I was old enough to know what that meant. You don't need me to say it, but I'm saying it anyway because I'm dead and I get to be sentimental without you making a face at me. Second, take care of Maisie. Not because Cora can't. Cora is the most competent person I've ever known, and she will be fine in the long run. I believe that. Take care of Maisie because every kid deserves someone who shows up even when they don't have to. Be that person. Teach her things. She likes learning how stuff works. She gets that from me, obviously. Third, and this is the part you're going to want to argue with. So I'll remind you I'm deceased and therefore winning this conversation by default. I know you, Patrick. I've known you since before you knew yourself. I know what you've kept filed away. I know why you've been pulling back. I had to put the pages down for a second. Cora said nothing. The apartment was very quiet. You are not a bad person for the feelings you've had. You are a person who loved his brother and respected that love by not acting on something he had no right to act on. That's called integrity. I saw it, I respected it. And I need you to stop using it as a reason to disappear. I am not giving you my blessing to pursue anything. That's not mine to give. She is not a thing that can be transferred. What I'm giving you is this: permission to be honest, permission to stop punishing yourself for being human, permission to show up again without treating your own presence like a crime. If something grows between you that is real and patient and built on more than shared grief and proximity, don't let guilt be the thing that stops it. You honored me in life, brother. Do me the courtesy of not making your own life smaller as a tribute. Take care of them. Take care of yourself. Grant. P.S. The Lees are still going to disappoint you. This is not related, but I felt you needed the reminder. I sat there for a long time with those 3 pages in my hands. Cora was looking at the window. I pulled back, I finally said, because I was afraid of what I was carrying. She turned to look at me. There it is, I said. The actual reason. Not because I was busy. Not because I needed space. Because caring about you the way I did felt like stealing something from him while he was still in the ground. Cora's breath came out slowly. Do you think I didn't know something was wrong? I thought I was being discreet. You once spent 45 minutes at a Labor Day barbecue explaining the structural deficiencies of their back deck to avoid having a conversation with me. There were genuine concerns about that deck. Grant had just stained it. Cosmetics don't address load-bearing issues, Cora. She put her hand over her mouth, and I could see the laugh fighting its way through the tears. I let out a breath I had been holding for what felt like 14 months. I never crossed anything, she said, when she could speak again. I want you to know that. I loved Grant completely. I was in it every day the whole way. I know. But she pressed her hands flat on the table. There were moments, not often, just moments when I noticed. The way you'd get a little louder when the room got quiet. The way you'd find a reason to be somewhere else when it started to feel like too much. She looked up. I told myself it was nothing. And then I told myself that being a person who noticed things about her partner's brother made me a bad person. And then I decided that was too simple and I was probably just tired. You're not a bad person, I said. Neither are you. I moved from the chair across from her to the chair beside her. Not touching, just close enough that the distance stopped feeling like policy. Cora, if I come back into your lives, and I want to very much. I don't want it to be because a letter from my dead brother assigned me a role. She looked at me steadily. Good. Because I didn't drive 4 hours in February to hand myself over like a line item in his estate. That was blunt. I've been rehearsing. How many times? Somewhere between Kingston and Napanee, I lost count. I looked at Grant's letter folded on the table between us. I missed Maisie's school concert in November. She sang off-key, Cora said. She was very confident about it. That's Grant's fault. Cora smiled. It was the first one that reached her eyes. Then it softened into something more complicated and she looked down at her hands. I don't know how to do this without it being strange. It will be strange, I said. I don't think we can avoid strange. I know. A pause. But I've been doing the thing where every time something good happens, I want to call you. And every time something breaks, I want to call you. And every time Maisie asks about you, I have to find a way to say, you've just been busy without making her feel like the people she loves keep leaving. That one took a moment to land. She asked? 2 weeks ago. She asked if you stopped coming because you were sad about Grant. And I said yes, partly, which is true. And then she said, is he going to be sad forever? And I didn't know what to tell her. I closed my eyes. I'm not sad forever, I said. Then maybe, Cora said. Stop acting like you are. She reached across the table and put her hand on top of mine. Tentative. Deliberate. I turned my hand over and she laced her fingers into mine and we sat like that in my kitchen in Ottawa in February with the tea going cold and Grant's letter between us and the streetcar outside making its rounds. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a beginning, exactly. But it was the first honest thing either of us had done in a long time. I was in Kingston the following Saturday. Cora told me not to bring anything. I brought a junior hockey kit for Maisie and a bag of coffee from a roastery on Wellington Street because Cora had once mentioned 3 years ago at Christmas that she'd been trying to find a good dark roast in Kingston. I stood on the porch and she opened the door and looked at the bag in my hand. That's from Ottawa. I was in Ottawa yesterday. You live in Ottawa. So I was conveniently placed. She looked at me for a second longer than she had to, and then she moved aside and let me in. Maisie came around the corner from the living room at full speed and stopped 2 feet away from me with her arms crossed, doing an impression of someone conducting a formal review. She was 7 now. She had Cora's eyes and Grant's inability to be still. You were gone a long time, she said. I know. I'm sorry. Did you bring me something? Maisie, Cora said. I'm just asking. I crouched down to her level and held out the bag. She studied it, then looked at me, then took it with the careful dignity of someone accepting terms of negotiation. Okay, she said. You can come in. Cora from behind her. He's already in. I mean emotionally. I laughed out loud. Cora made a helpless gesture. She's been reading my essays. We spent the afternoon the way you spend Saturday afternoons with a 7-year-old, entirely on her terms. I was shown the loose tile in the bathroom she had named Gerald. I was introduced to her collection of rocks, which were organized by what they looked like rather than any geological principle. I was informed that her school had a hamster named Kevin, who she believed was being underappreciated. Cora made pasta for dinner. She had music on in the kitchen, something low and folky, and she moved around the stove with the ease of someone who had made peace with her own space. I leaned against the counter and handed her things when she asked for them, and we talked about small things at first. Her school board's new admin software, my company's winter slowdown, a podcast we'd both apparently been listening to without knowing it. Then she grew quiet for a moment, stirring the sauce. Grant's mother called, she said. I waited. Someone told her I'd been seen with you. She glanced sideways at me. Small town. Possibly a very chatty postal worker. What did she say? Cora's expression moved through something careful before she answered. She asked if it was too soon. She asked if I'd thought about what it meant for Maisie. She wasn't unkind. She was grieving. And grief has edges. She turned back to the stove. I told her nothing had happened, which was true at the time. And you hated saying it. She didn't answer right away. I hated saying it because it felt like apologizing for something I hadn't done yet, and I didn't want to apologize in advance for something that might be real. I took the spoon from her hand gently so she turned around. She did. You don't have to apologize for anything, I said. Not to her, not to anyone. I know that in theory. Cora. She looked at me directly, which she was very good at when she wasn't protecting herself. I know, she said. I just need to hear it sometimes. You don't have to apologize, I said again, slower. Not for loving Grant, not for still being here, not for this. I didn't touch her. I didn't need to just yet. None of this is a betrayal. Her breath came out in a long, careful exhale. From the living room, Maisie called that Kevin, the hamster situation deserved more attention, and we both turned toward the sound, and the heaviness in the kitchen lifted just slightly. After Maisie was asleep, Cora and I sat at the kitchen table with tea, which was becoming a pattern. The house was quiet in the way that houses with children get quiet. Full, not empty. Grant's mother, I said. I want to call her. Cora looked at me. Not to justify anything, just to talk. She lost him too. And I haven't been there for her the way I should have been. She might not be ready. She might not be, I said. But she has a letter she hasn't opened, apparently. And maybe just knowing someone else is sitting with that might help. Cora was quiet for a long time. Then, he wrote one for her? Grant wrote letters for everyone he loved. That's the person he was. She wiped her eye with the side of her hand quickly, like she was hoping I wouldn't catch it. I caught it. Hey, I said. She looked up. I'm not going anywhere this time. Her lower lip steadied itself. You said that pretty easily. I've been working up to it since Kingston Road. That got me half a laugh, real and wet. She reached across the table and covered my hand again. And this time I didn't just hold it. I turned toward her in the chair, and she came the rest of the way. And when I kissed her, it was careful at first, the way you are with something you've been waiting a long time to not ruin. She tasted like chamomile and something that had been patient a long time. Her hand came to my jaw, and I felt the last of the distance I'd been carrying dissolve slowly. Not all at once, more like snow in March. Not gone exactly, but no longer holding its shape. When we separated, she leaned her forehead against mine. I feel guilty, she whispered. I know. And relieved. I know. And a little like I'd like to do that again, which seems wildly poorly timed. Grant said not to be afraid if something familiar showed up. She laughed softly against my cheek. He said a lot of things. He was always like that. We stayed there in the quiet kitchen for a while, her head eventually moving to my shoulder, both of us looking at nothing in particular. I could hear the refrigerator hum and the radiator making its winter sounds, and somewhere far down the street, a car passing on ice. Maisie has a March break in 3 weeks, Cora said. I know. I was thinking about driving down. She wants to go to Upper Canada Village. I've never been. She tilted her head to look up at me. How have you never been? I was a deprived child. You were from Ontario. Grant always wanted to be the one who took me for the first time. He kept putting it off. I paused. Maybe it should be her instead. Cora looked at me for a long moment, the kind of long that means someone is deciding whether to say something true. Then she said, "He would have liked that." Not as a consolation. As a fact. I called Grant's mother, Patricia, the following week. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was careful, the way people's voices get when they're trying not to show how much they've been thinking about a call. I told her I had been missing her, that I should have come around more, that I hadn't been as present as she deserved, and that I was sorry. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "He talked about you constantly, even at the end." I said I knew. I said I talked about him constantly too. Still did. More quiet. Then, "Are you good to them? To Cora and the girl?" "I'm trying to be." "He always said you were the reliable one." A pause. I told him that was backward, you being the younger one. It was never particularly logical. Something that might have been almost a laugh. "No," she said, "he wasn't." We talked for an hour. She cried. I did too once, quietly into the hand that wasn't holding the phone. She told me she had Grant's letter on her nightstand unopened. And I told her she didn't have to rush. And she said maybe she'd read it in the spring when the snow was gone and the light was better. I thought that was one of the wisest things I'd heard in a long time. Before she hung up, she said, "Don't let them be alone too much. They need." She stopped. Tried again. "Maisie needs a full house." I said I understood. March break, I drove down on a Friday. The three of us went to Upper Canada Village on the Saturday, Maisie in her winter coat over a dress, because she had decided she was going to dress like she lived there in 1867, which Cora allowed because it's not a battle anyone needs to fight. Maisie ran ahead of us on the wooden paths and narrated the life of everyone we passed, with increasing historical confidence and decreasing accuracy. Cora walked beside me with her hands in her coat pockets, and at some point on the path back from the blacksmith's shop, her elbow found mine and stayed there. Maisie turned around and looked at us. "Are you two holding arms?" she asked. "My hands are cold," Cora said. Maisie considered this. "Uncle Patrick has warm arms," she said, with the tone of someone confirming a known fact, and then turned back around and kept walking. Cora and I looked at each other. "She's been reading your essays," I said. Cora bumped her shoulder into mine, hard. That night after Maisie was asleep, we sat on Cora's back porch with the remains of a bottle of Ontario Riesling, and the kind of cold that's actually fine if you're dressed for it. The yard was still mostly snow, but you could see along the south fence where it was starting to pull back. Grant had put that fence in. I'd helped him dig the post holes one October weekend 4 years ago, while Cora kept bringing us coffee and telling us we were going to hit the gas line, which we did not. "I think about what this looks like to people," Cora said. "I know. Not to everyone, just to the ones who loved him." "I know." And then I think about what he said in his letter, about monuments. She pulled her knees up. "He knew me well enough to know I'd make a very dedicated monument." "You would have been excellent at it." "Terrible," she said. "I would have been miserable and convinced it was noble." She looked at the fence. "He didn't want that for Maisie. He didn't want that for Maisie. He didn't want that for me." A beat. "And he didn't want you to disappear either. He wanted." She stopped. "He wanted his people to still be people," I said. She leaned against me. I put my arm around her. The maple at the back of the yard was still bare, but you could see the buds starting at the tips of the branches if the light hit it right. February had finally let go. "What does Maisie call you?" Cora asked. "Uncle Patrick. Always has." She asked me last week if that would change. I was quiet for a second. "What did you tell her?" I said I didn't know yet, that sometimes names are about more than what things are called. She paused. She said, "So it might just stay Uncle Patrick forever?" And I said yes, probably. And she said, "Good, I like that one." I held Cora a little tighter. She let me. We didn't get engaged until the following November. I didn't plan a speech. I didn't book a restaurant or arrange for anything cinematic. We were in her kitchen on a Sunday morning, Maisie at her grandmother's for the weekend, the first real snow of the year coming down outside the window, and I was making scrambled eggs badly while Cora sat on the counter and told me the trick was low heat and patience, two things she claimed I had gotten better at over the past year. I turned around with the spatula still in my hand and said, I want to marry you. Not as a tribute to him, and not because of the letters, and not because Maisie needs something. Because I choose you. The way you argue with crossword clues out loud. The way you apologize to houseplants when you forget to water them. The way you cry at the Remembrance Day ceremony every year, and then act like you have something in your eye. I choose all of it. I choose you. Cora had gone very still on the counter. You burned the eggs, she said. I know. They're going to stick to the pan. I know. She slid off the counter, took the spatula out of my hand, turned the burner off, and then looked up at me from about 6 inches away with those dark eyes that had been ahead of most conversations I'd ever had with her. Yes, she said. Obviously, yes. I kissed her. The eggs were ruined. I didn't care even slightly. Recalled Maisie to tell her. She said, does this mean you're making pancakes to celebrate? Cora said we could probably do that. Maisie said, okay, but put blueberries in. Grant always put blueberries in. And then there was a small silence that held everything, and Cora said, quietly, we can do that. And I reached over and took her hand. We got married in June at a conservation area outside Kingston, under the oak trees near the water. It wasn't large. Family, close friends, Maisie in a dress she had strong opinions about, Patricia in the front row beside Cora's parents, turning Grant's old watch around her wrist throughout the ceremony. She had read his letter in April. She had called Cora afterward and talked for 2 hours. She did not give us a speech, but she brought butter tarts from the bakery Grant used to stop at on the 401, and she set them on the dessert table without saying anything, and everyone who knew what that meant understood. During the bows, Cora held my hands and whispered, no more deck inspections. No promises, I said. She laughed, and then we were married, with Maisie throwing petals overhand because she had asked about the underhand technique and found it insufficient, and Patricia in the front row allowing herself, finally, to smile. That night, after everyone had gone, Cora and I sat on the dock with our shoes off and the lake making its quiet sounds around us. Maisie was asleep in the cabin behind us. The watch Patricia had brought, Grant's watch, was on my wrist. She had given it to me before she left, without a lot of words, and I had put it on and worn it through the rest of the evening. Cora leaned her head on my shoulder. He was right, you know, she said. About what specifically? He was right about a lot of things. About the ending. She laced her fingers through mine. I think he knew how it would go before we did. I looked out at the water. The dock lights were on and the surface was dark and still. Somewhere on the far shore, someone had a fire going. I had honored my brother once by standing beside him every day he had, and somehow in the years since, I had found a way to honor him again. Not by freezing in place, not by making a monument of the grief, but by doing the thing he had asked in 3 pages of cramped handwriting on a night when he was scared and honest and more himself than I'd ever known him to be. I held my wife's hand in the dark and listened to the lake. Grant's watch was warm on my wrist. Nothing about that evening felt unfinished. What would you have done if your brother's partner showed up over a year after he died, carrying something he'd left for you, and the something was permission? Had you ever been given a gift by someone who was already gone? Tell me your story in the comments. If this one stayed with you, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. I used to think that doing the right thing meant doing the invisible thing. Staying quiet. Pulling back. Making yourself smaller so the people around you had more room to grieve without your complications getting in the way. I thought that was integrity. I thought that was integrity. I thought that was how you honored someone. What I didn't understand, not until Grant's letter, not until Cora drove 4 hours in February to hand me something I wasn't ready for, is that there's a difference between being decent and being a coward, and for a long time I had been using one as a cover for the other. The reason Patrick's story ends the way it does isn't luck. It isn't timing. It's a chain of choices, most of them made quietly over years. Grant chose to write honestly when he was scared. Cora chose to keep that envelope for 14 months and then get in the car anyway. Patrick chose, eventually, to stop using his own goodness as an excuse to disappear. Every part of what came after, the kitchen in Kingston, the dock in June, Maisie throwing petals overhand because the underhand technique was insufficient, came directly from those choices, Nothing about this story is accidental. What strikes me most, looking back, is how much of what went right came down to character. Not talent, not luck, not the right circumstances. Just the slow, unglamorous work of being someone who can be trusted. Grant was that person. He knew both of them well enough to see what they couldn't see about themselves, and he had the clarity to write it down before he was gone. That kind of clear-eyed honesty, the kind that tells someone the truth even when it's complicated, even when you won't be there to explain it, takes a particular kind of moral seriousness that I don't think gets talked about enough. It's easy to be kind when kindness is comfortable. It's harder to be honest when honesty costs something. And then there's the question of what you do with grief when it shows up in your hands. You can hold it so tightly it becomes the only thing you are. Or you can do what Cora did. Read a letter in the spring when the light was better. Make a phone call that hurt. Drive 4 hours on a February highway and decide that surviving isn't the same as living. That takes something that I can only describe as a kind of deep stubbornness about your own life. Not optimism exactly, just the refusal to let the worst thing that ever happened to you be the last word. Patrick got there too, slowly, with a lot of deck inspections along the way. But he got there because he was willing to sit with the uncomfortable truth about himself, that he had been using distance as virtue and change it. That willingness, that honest reckoning with who you've been versus who you want to be, is where most good things start. I think about Grant's watch on Patrick's wrist at the end of that wedding night. Not a replacement. Not a symbol of being chosen over someone. Just a man who was loved, passing something forward to a man who loved him back. That's the whole story, really. What we inherit from the people we lose isn't just grief. It's also permission to keep going, to keep choosing, to keep showing up for the people still here. That's worth something. More than keeping the door locked and calling it loyalty.